They divided everything between them. It took him a moment to realize what was missing.
Your guitar. You're not taking it?
What will I need them for? Some folks say there's still people in the north, but I'm not convinced. I think it's just going to be us.
For a moment, he realized he wasn't the only one leaving his dreams behind. Coriolanus promised, with more conviction than he felt, that they would get new dreams out there. He pulled out his father's compass, consulted it, and pointed.
North is this way.
I thought we'd head to the lake first. It's mostly north. I'd like to see it one more time.
It seemed as good a plan as any, so he didn't object. Soon they'd be adrift in the wilderness, never to return. Why not indulge her? He tucked in a bit of a scarf that had come loose. Lucy Gray gazed back at the town, although the only thing Coriolanus could make out was the gallows.
Goodbye, District 12. Goodbye, Hanging Tree and Hunger Games and Mare Lip. Someday something will kill me, but it won't be you. You know, people aren't so bad, really. It's what the world does to them, like us, in the arena. We did things in there we'd never have considered if they just left us alone.
I don't know. I killed Mayfair, and there was no arena in sight.
But only to save me. I think there's a natural goodness built into human beings. You know when you've stepped across the line into evil, and it's your life's challenge to try and stay on the right side of that line. Sometimes there are tough decisions. I know that. Of course I do. I'm a victor. It'd be nice, in my new life, not to have to kill anyone.
I'm with you there. 3's enough for one lifetime.
A feral cry came from nearby, reminding him of his lack of a weapon.
I'm going to make a walking stick. Do you want one?
Sure, that could come in handy in more ways than one. Who's the third?
What? Ow!
His hand slipped, driving a piece of bark under his nail. Coriolanus bit the end of the splinter to pull it out with his teeth, buying a moment of time. Who indeed? The answer was Sejanus, of course, but he couldn't admit to that. Hoping to distract her, he held out his hand, wiggling the compromised fingernail. Lucy Gray ignored him.
So, Bobbin, Mayfair, who's the third?
His mind raced for a plausible explanation. Could he have been involved in a freak accident? A training death? Maybe he was cleaning a weapon and it went off by mistake. He decided it was best to make a joke out of it.
Myself. I killed the old me so I could come with you.
Well, I hope old you doesn't haunt new you. We've already got enough ghosts between us.
The moment passed, but it had killed the conversation. Coriolanus took a deep drink of water. He doubted the peacekeepers would be concerned of his whereabouts any time soon. Odds are, they would think he's with another peacekeeper in town. Unless they found the guns, of course. They hiked on toward the lake, each lost in their own thoughts. It all seemed unreal to him, as if this were just a pleasure outing, as the one 2 Sundays ago had been. As if they were going on a picnic. But no. When they reached the lake, they'd moved on into the wilderness. How would they eat? Where would they live? What was there to aspire to once wealth, fame, and power had been eliminated? Preoccupied with these questions, the second leg of the journey passed quickly. They set their loads on the shore, and Lucy Gray went to find branches for fishing poles. They baited the hooks and sat silently on the bank, waiting for a strike as the birds chattered around them. She caught 2. He caught nothing. Heavy, dark clouds rolled in, providing some relief from the beating sun, but adding to his oppression. This was his life now. Thick, cold raindrops began to plop down on him, leaving wet marks on his fatigues.
Never be able to cook in this. Better go inside. There's a fireplace in there we can use.
She could only mean the one lake house that still had a roof. Probably his last roof. How did you build a roof anyway? After she'd quickly cleaned the fish and wrapped them in leaves, they gathered up their bundles and hurried to the house as the rain pelted them. They scrambled in out of the wet and dropped their belongings. Lucy Gray crossed the fireplace, laid the fish down on the little concrete hearth, and began to arrange layers of wood and twigs on an old metal grate. Coriolanus considered the possibility of just staying in the sturdy little house, with plenty of wood around and the lake to fish in. but it would be too dangerous to put roots down this close to District 12. The wind blew a splatter of rain in, peppering his pants with icy drops. He swung the door shut behind him and froze. The door had concealed something, a long burlap bag. From the opening poked the barrel of a shotgun. It couldn't be. Unable to breathe, he nudged the bag open with his boot, revealing the shotgun and a peacekeeper's rifle. A little more and he could recognize the grenade launcher. These were the guns Sejanus bought. Lucy Gray joined him and leaned down, pulling the burlap from the weapons.
Should we take them with us?
Rather not. I don't trust them. This will come in handy, though.
She pulled out a long knife, turning the blade over in her hand.
I think I'll go dig up some Katniss.
There's a good patch by the lake. I thought they weren't ready. And it's raining. You'll get soaked.
2 weeks can make a lot of difference. And I'm not made of sugar.
After she left, he lifted the bottom of the burlap bag, and the weapon slid out on the floor. Here it was, the murder weapon. All he had to do was destroy it, and he'd be free. Free to go forward to District 2. Free to rejoin the human race without fear. Once the gun was gone, there'd be nothing to connect him to the murders. Absolutely nothing. No, wait. There would be one thing. Lucy Gray. No matter. She'd never tell. It wasn't her style. And it'd implicate her in the murders as well. Coriolanus glanced out the window. The rain had diminished to a sprinkle. She was certainly taking a long time with those potatoes. He thought about how coolly she'd killed in the arena. First, that frail little Wovie. Then the calculated way she'd taken out Treach. And she claimed that Reaper had rabies, that it was a mercy kill. But who knew? No. Lucy Gray was no lamb. She was not made of sugar. She was a victor. He checked to see that the peacekeeper's rifle was loaded, then opened the door wide. She was nowhere in sight.
Lucy Gray!
The only response came from a lone mockingjay on a nearby branch, who made an effort to mimic his voice but failed, as his words were not particularly musical.
Give it up. You're no Jabberjay. Lucy Gray, please. I just want to talk to you.
No question. She was hiding from him. But why? There could only be one answer. Because she'd figured it out. Sejanus. She must have figured out that Sejanus was the third person Coriolanus had killed. Put the gun down, he told himself. All she has is a knife. A big knife. The best he could manage was to sling the gun onto his back.
Lucy Gray, please. I just want to talk.
Bird chatter filled his ears, and the overcast sky made visibility poor. The underbrush concealed her footprints, but somehow he felt he was right on track. Adrenaline sharpened his senses, and he noticed a snapped branch here, a scruff mask in the moss there. A patch of orange caught his eye, and he smiled. I don't want you to lose me, she'd said. And he hadn't. He pushed through the branches and into a small clearing canopied by trees. The orange scarf lay across some briars, where it had apparently blown loose and snagged as she fled. Oh well, it confirmed he was on the right track. He went to retrieve it, when a faint rustle in the leaves pulled him up short. He just registered the snake when it struck, uncoiling like a spring and digging its teeth into the forearm extended toward the scarf. This was a booby trap, and he'd walked straight into it. Poor lamb indeed. Coriolanus knew nothing about snakes. He didn't know how long he might have. He yanked his sleeve down over his forearm, pulled his rifle off his shoulder, and started after her. She wasn't so easy to track now. Perhaps she'd circle around him and was headed to the lake house for a gun herself. He strained his ears and, yes. He thought he could hear someone moving off to his right. He crashed through the woods after her, branches and thorns catching his clothes and scratching his face, ignoring all of it until he came to the spot where he guessed her to be. There was no trace of her.
Lucy Gray, won't you talk to me? We can work something out.
Her voice surprised him, lifting suddenly and sweetly into the air.
Are you coming to the tree where a necklace of rope side by side with me? Strange things
things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met up at midnight in the hanging tree.
He took a step in her direction just as a mockingjay picked up her song, then a second, then a third. The woods came alive with their melody as dozens joined in. Clever, devious, deadly girl. She knew they'd cover for her. He lifted the rifle and machine gun to trees, trying to wipe out the birds. Furious, he turned this way and that and finally blasted the woods in a full circle. He collapsed on the ground, dizzy and nauseous as the woods exploded. Every bird of every kind screaming its head off while the mockingjays continued their rendition of the hanging tree. Nature gone mad. He had to get out of there. His arm had begun to swell. Making his way back to the lake, everything in the house remained as he had left it. Using a pair of socks as gloves, he wiped off the murder weapon. Judging it heavy enough to sink without being weighted down, he plunged into the lake and towed it out into the cool water. He submerged the bag and watched it spiral slowly down into the gloom. What of the supplies? Should he destroy them? No point. Either she was dead, and the Covey would find them, or she was alive, and would hopefully use them to escape. Coriolanus made it back, not to the hanging tree exactly, but to District 12, wandering out of a stretch of trees into a clump of miners' hovels and somehow finding the road. He saw no one as he made it to the base back through the fence. Eventually, he made it back to his room, shocked to find it was only mid-afternoon. The following morning, after a tearful goodbye from his bunkmates, he boarded the hovercraft for District 2. Comforted by comfort, he leaned his temple against the window, hoping to get in a nap. All night, while the rain had drummed on the barracks roof, he'd wondered where Lucy Gray was. Dead in the rain? Curled up by the fire in the lake house? If she'd survived, surely she'd abandoned the idea of returning to District 12. He dozed off with the melody to the hanging tree humming in his brain.